Okay, so we've talked about the rods, we've talked about the reels. Now, what does fascinate me is the line.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the line?
Yeah, no problem at all. Right, fly line, as you can see, is quite a thick profile. As we touched on earlier, this is the weight that loads the rod. This is your weight, the actual fly line, okay? They come in lots of different types. This profile is a weight forward, which is exactly what it says on the tin. All the weight is at the front of the line. The front part of the line is thick, the back part is thin, okay? And this is a floating line. We have different sink rate lines. You have a floating line, you can get a sink tip line, which is where the actual tip of the fly line sinks. You can then move on to an intermediate line, which sinks just under the surface. Then onto a medium sink line, which may sink at sort of 3 inches per second. And then you can go to the other end of the spectrum where you have a very fast sinking line, so it sinks to the bottom very quickly. A lot of people have the idea with fly fishing that it's all done on the surface, but in actual fly fishing, most of your fishing is done subsurface and sometimes quite deep, so you need a sinking fly line.
Okay, so do you treat your line with anything, or how do you maintain it? Because this looks as though it's got some like paint or something on it.
Yeah, you do get dirt on them. Obviously, when I fly fish off the bank at places, I use something called a line tray, which goes around your belt. It's a tray that actually catches your line, your fly line in it, so as it doesn't actually go on the floor in all the mud and the dirt, because mud and dirt does actually knock the fly line about quite a bit. But if you haven't got a line tray, just when you finish fishing, pull all your line off your reel. You get a little cloth and you can buy line cleaning agents and just give it a clean before you put it away.
Cool. So they look quite expensive. I know there's a lot of work goes into developing these lines. So what sort of price should I be looking to pay for a fly line?
Okay, well, we've got a couple of lines here from the Shakespeare range. The Sigma, a very good line, nice line. That's going to cost you around about the 25 quid mark.
Oh, okay.
And then if you want to step up to a slightly better line, again, this one, another Shakespeare one, the Agility, these will knock you back about 40 quid.
Oh, okay, so it's not too bad.
No, so to get started, you know, I'd go for the cheaper one to start with, and as you progress, then you know, move up to a slightly better line. But there's certainly nothing wrong with these. They're absolutely perfect for the job.
Wow. Okay. And does the price vary from the float, intermediate, and sink?
No, they're all a standard price for the range.
Didn't realise fly fishing lines come in so many different variations.
And another good thing to mention as well with the reels that we didn't touch on is that they have interchangeable spools. Okay, so your initial outlay on one reel, okay, you may pay 70, 80 quid for a reel. You can get a reel for 15 quid. You can get spare spools. You just push a little button and out comes the spool, okay?
Oh, okay.
So the spools then will be a cheaper price. They may be sort of, you know, 15 or 20 quid a piece. You buy 2 or 3 spools, and I would recommend to somebody who's starting for the first time to get a floating line and an intermediate line. Those 2 lines will do you to get started. So an intermediate is a slow sinker, sinks quite slowly, but if you leave it long enough, it will cover the depth. It will sink to the bottom, so you can cover a range of depths in the water. And as you progress, buy some more lines, and that'll get you through most situations, really.
Okay.
What we need to look at then is your tippet.
Yeah, what is the difference between a tippet and a leader? And
Right, it's just different. A leader, a tippet, both the same thing. But as obviously, when you're fly fishing, you're not going to be tying a fly onto this great big thick piece of fly line.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we put on what's known as a tippet. Fluorocarbon, very, very, very popular these days because it's virtually invisible in water.
Yeah.
Okay, and it sinks.
Yeah.
It does sink. Attaching it to the end of the fly line, this line's got a nail knot on it, but what we use a lot of the time is a little braided loop, which will be a little loop of braid material that you then tie your tippet material onto. And you would perhaps put, if your rod's 10 foot in length, you would put 10 foot of nylon or fluorocarbon onto there, and then you would tie your fly onto the end of that fluorocarbon.
Oh, okay.
Because obviously you're not going to want to, if the fish see this great big thick piece of line and you've got a fly.
So when you say 10 foot aid, is that 10 foot, is that because you can imagine the fish must be spooked by this line?
Yeah, exactly,
The
exactly.
longer they tip it.
We tend to keep it at about 10 foot, 12 foot.
Okay.
You can go up to 20 foot with 3 flies on. But as a rule, when you're first starting, put a piece of leader material on about the length of your rod. A longer leader is a little bit more difficult to cast. So when you're first starting, that. Leaders as well, you can get tapered leaders, which are quite thick at one end, which you attach to the fly line,
Yeah.
then taper down to a thin point. This aids turnover of the fly,
Yeah.
okay, because it turns the fly over as it tapers down to a lighter line. A lot easier for a beginner.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, you know, these probably £2 or £3 a piece, yeah, and you know, a leader will last you all day if you don't have any tangles.